Okay, so I am thrilled to be here today with Lance Rios. Lance is a very successful entrepreneur. He is the president and founder of Being Latino, and he's also a partner with Hispanicize. Lance,
Correct.
thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So Lance, I had the great pleasure of meeting you several years ago when you were just kind of starting with this fledgling enterprise that even at that time was already pretty large and surprising a lot of people with a tremendous engagement with and by the Latino community. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey between that time that we first met, fast forwarding all the way to the tremendous success that you have today?
Oh, it was that was 5 years ago already, Cuddy. That was like crazy. No, I mean, like, obviously it started off as a passion project. It wasn't anything that I necessarily had like any idea what it would turn into or evolve into. I was willing to put in the effort to allow it to grow and thrive, and we're here today, and we've had a lot of growth, and we've evolved from being a Facebook page into a company or a conglomerate of companies. So it's been like a pretty cool ride.
That's fantastic. And so you've retained the identity of being Latino, but you're now also in partnership with Hispanicize. Can you tell me a little bit about that structure and why you chose to do it in that way?
Yeah, so the partnership with Hispanicize, we both saw that we were doing a lot of cool things in the U.S. Hispanic social media space. Manny approached me probably about 4 years ago originally, and then after about a year of conversations back and forth, we had a meeting of the minds, and essentially we exchanged shares of companies. So Being Latino in that exchange owns part of this wonderful event that we're at right now, and vice versa, Hispanicize has an interest in Being Latino as well. So it's been a really cool partnership. We've been able to leverage each other's strengths, resources, all that great stuff to truly evolve and sort of set a lot of standards in social media, U.S. Hispanic.
Fantastic. So Hispanicize, what do you see as possible for Being Latino in the context of Hispanicize?
I mean, Hispanicize, I think, really represents a culture of what, or the opportunity for brands to interact with social media, but also empower people within that social media space to do their own thing, have their own voice, grow, evolve, and realize that there are opportunities to, if you want to make a living off of it. And for a lot of people, like myself, it was a passion project. When I wasn't making money, I was still cool with it, and it was like not necessarily something that I thought of at the time that I wanted to monetize off of it. But the fact that we do have the ability to do so while pursuing something we love is a great thing. There's tons of people just like how I was 5 years ago that are going to be able to do the same thing.
And what advice would you give to someone like yourself who has a passion project but is contemplating whether or not to do it as a full-on entrepreneur?
I mean, one thing that I could say is that one of the best feelings in the world was when I quit my job in corporate America, which was awesome, working at a really cool company to pursue what I was passionate about. And if you are passionate about something, think about how you can grow it. Don't necessarily look directly at how can I monetize this immediately, because I think that it does tarnish to a certain extent what you're looking to achieve. And as long as you're passionate about it, like, you will make it work. You'll find a way to make it work, and you just need to have that drive in you constantly.
So you would really tell people to focus on what it is that they're doing itself.
Absolutely.
And then think about the money piece afterwards.
The money will come. If you build it, it'll come.
That's excellent. Now tell me specifically about this year's event. What do you see as possible for Being Latino at this particular event? What do you want to get out of it?
There's a lot that we can get out of it. I mean, this event is one of those really unique spaces where people who work in social media, marketers, people who are musicians, people who are film creators, directors, producers, can all really integrate into a space of just really creative people and be able to network and to basically facilitate relationships that will last beyond this 5-day event. That's one of the biggest things that we hear from a lot of people is the fact, like, oh, I made great connections, or I did this as a result of Hispanicize. So yes, this is like an event, but there does have the opportunity to have some really cool relationships that will last a lifetime.
So one of the things that you think is really an opportunity this year is to continue to build those relationships with the folks who are gathered here.
Definitely, because it takes a lot of people to execute anyone's dream, so you have to be able to figure out who those people are and how you can help them as well.
Fantastic. So let me take it in a little bit different direction, if you would. So, in those 5 years, I'm sure there must have been some challenges.
Yeah.
Can you share with me what are some of the biggest challenges that you believe face entrepreneurs such as yourself?
One of the biggest challenges is probably finding that balance of when to sort of take yourself out of that world, because it was funny because somebody mentioned it last night. It's like you have 4 choices in life: to pursue your passion, to pursue your health, to pursue continuing relationships with your family and loved ones, or career. And he said it, and he was like, "You pick 2 out of the 4 because
Oh,
you can never have more than
wow.
2." And I know that some people
Really?
have sort of superseded that model, but at the end of the day, it is really difficult to balance it all out, because when you do become so enthralled in anything that you're interested in, like, you have to realize that taking the time away to recognize some of the other important things in life is always a necessity. It's just really challenging to do.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because my husband and I, we just had a similar conversation just a couple of days ago. I'm doing this Latinos in Tech event right before South by Southwest. I have my Dandelion Strategy Consulting work, and I have my baby, my new 1-year-old
Yeah,
baby, and my
congratulations
husband.
again.
So how do you balance it all? And
It's
so,
difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, more power to you, because that adds a few more pieces to that equation. But no, you have to find a way.
So you think that's kind of the biggest challenge that you faced on the entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I think that because a lot of those pieces go into a little smaller subcategories of issues to deal with, but at its rawest form, yeah, it's like being able to maintain some sort of balance.
And what inspires you the most? What makes you keep going down this path despite such big a challenge?
That's a good question. I don't know, because I believe in the concept. I believe that there needs to be a place for people who want to consume content in English and Spanish, but have a really authentic Hispanic angle to it. A place that wasn't necessarily monotonous in the type of content that is sort of distributed to it. And I think that, online and, Facebook specifically, it's like everyone lives on Facebook already, and it's just being able to provide information within that platform to allow people to have just a really convenient experience in that consumption behavior, I guess.
So tell me a little bit more, for those who are watching this who might not know what the Being Latino community is about and how you make it so it's not monotonous, so it is really engaging and interesting. So what exactly is it that you do?
Well, what I do is position myself around like really smart, creative, ambitious people, because myself, it would be impossible to manage everything that we manage. Currently we have a social footprint of like 6.5 million people, and
That's
like
incredible.
because of that, you're needing a constant stream of content on an ongoing basis across multiple platforms, over 15 Facebook pages. We have like 8 Instagram pages, multiple Twitter accounts. So having people who can really see that vision and understand how to strategize and adjust to situations like Facebook's purging and all these other things. Twitter also has some recent algorithm shifts. They just introduced video, which could be a game changer across the board. So it's those types of people who I surround myself with who make it possible to do everything, because if those people were not there, there would be no company.
So it's your team.
Totally.
And how do you find those people on the team? If people want to get involved, how do they find you?
That's a good question. But I mean, for the full-time opportunities, like I actually didn't have to do too much digging.
They come to you.
Yeah, a lot of times people will say, "Hey, I want to work out, or I want to do something with what you're doing. I believe in it. It's really cool." Whether it's a paid opportunity or volunteer opportunity, like what's available, and then we could sort of discuss that. This year we have been doing some active hiring from people who have basically come to us and shown their drive, ambition, interest in the space, interest in the company. So we don't have too hard of a time finding people, and then keeping people on board is definitely important, training people. But at the end of the day, I think it's a really cool thing that people actually would want to work at Being Latino, because it's a startup company.
Of course. And so I know that people can follow the hashtag HISPZ15 for Hispanicize. Is there a similar hashtag that people should follow as it relates to being Latino and the work that you're doing?
Yeah. Hashtag Be Latino is our hashtag officially for like 3 years now. So you can see everything that we've been doing across Twitter, Instagram, all those places.
That's awesome. And what are you most excited about in this coming year?
This coming year, that's a good question. One thing that, and I spoke about this on one of my panels yesterday, one thing that I think has really been a game changer late 2014 and going into the current day is video content, and how that sort of is totally, completely revamping the entire social space. And that is one thing to me that I feel like we've done a decent job keeping up with, figuring out how to best leverage it across multiple platforms. But I do think that there's going to be a plethora of new and different opportunities through video content. And I think that, there will be the opportunity for us to sort of just redefine ourselves and potentially have a large focus on video as a representation of what we do.
So does that mean that you start drifting away from some of the other channels?
No, absolutely not. It just means that we're going to have more of a core focus on video should these opportunities actually arise and look like it's something that's viable.
That's great. Let me ask you about the Latino community. You've been in this space now for several years, right? And you've seen the evolutions and you've seen the challenges. What are your thoughts around where we are today, 2015, if we look at this Hispanicize event as kind of a point in time to reflect on where the Latino community is, what would you say?
The Latino community in like a social media sense, or just as a whole?
Well, let's do both.
Okay. Latino community in the social media sense, I think that, I would say 2 years ago, it was just very premature still, despite a lot of the conferences that were coming up. The pool of talent within those conferences were still very limited when you compared it to general market. I think within the past year and a half, 2 years, we've definitely seen a whole new crowd of people in the U.S. influencer space. A lot of these guys from Vine have just come out of nowhere, and now they have millions and millions of followers. They're incredibly influential. They have a huge Hispanic following. And some of these newer emerging platforms that really haven't been talked about much in the USH space, like Snapchat, and some of these other more emerging platforms, maybe like LO2, could be a game changer because they are very different properties. And Hispanics are usually the first one in social space to be able to try and leverage whatever is new out there. So there will be a lot of different changes in that landscape where I think that people are definitely taking a more concentrated effort on using social media to their benefit. As a whole, I think that this current day is it's bigger for Hispanics than any other time in the United States, especially with the elections coming up next year. We've seen the Hispanic vote being pretty much the main focal point for anybody who is running for office. And I think that from this point until we figure out who's going to be our next leader, there is going to be a lot of attention to us. And the fact that we are having a lot more representation within our community, it will be really cool and very interesting to see what happens and how we sort of shift and continue to shift the face of the United States.
And is being Latino political?
Yes, we have a lot of political content. The reason that we were more political about 2 years ago, we took a step back from being so politics focused because at the end of the day, it's really hard to talk about politics without being biased, right? When you have a lot of people who are political contributors, they're always going to lean a little left or they're going to lean a little right. And when you get into the discussion of politics, especially when you're talking about Latinos, we're so segmented with how our political views are overall, it becomes just a very touchy subject. So instead of being entirely focused on politics for Latinos, we do offer that content on a daily basis. It just hasn't necessarily been our core focus currently.
What's the core focus?
Our core focus is basically entertainment focus. So being able to put out any sort of the freshest content, whether it's video, picture content, anything that could basically relate to a wide array of that Latino audience overall, which essentially, it's not necessarily like a monolithic group, but there are certain things that tie into multiple ethnicities under the umbrella. So we try to appeal to that wider range of audience because, at the end of the day, social media is still a relatively loose kind of laid-back feeling environment, and we really want to be able to cater to those people's needs because at the end of the day, it's you may have your idea of what you want Latinos to consume, or you may have an idea of what everyone thinks they need to consume, but at the end of the day, through our 5 years of case studies and millions of followers, afterwards, we've kind of figured out what it is that people want to consume, when they want to consume it, and then how much of it they want to consume.
So we're a very diverse community, but you're seeing certain threads that kind of weave us together,
Totally.
That engage folks.
Totally.
That's great, very powerful. You had mentioned earlier, I think alluded to this population, this new population, and so there's all this talk about the Latina millennials. Can you tell me a little bit about them, and is your strategy different as it relates to the millennials, or
Yeah.
Do you segment based on different audience? What are your thoughts around that?
At the end of the day, it's really hard to appeal to everyone, right? Not everyone is going to like your content, and as we grow and we get to the numbers that we've been getting to recently, that challenge becomes more challenging. But at the end of the day, there are certain platforms I think that lend themselves to that millennial group. Like I mentioned earlier, Vine is it's really huge amongst millennials, and I think that not only is it huge amongst them, they're consuming it and they're sharing it and they're engaging it so much more than anywhere else, right? And a lot of their behavior, I think, is going to permeate to the other social platforms. One of the examples that I gave in my other platform was the fact that a lot of brands, whenever they're we want to do a cool video, a branded video, and we're going to have it live on social media, they would say, okay, it's got to be at least 2 minutes, 2 minutes or under, but you can't go past 2 minutes. With the emergence of Vine and Instagram video being 6 seconds and 15 seconds, we've seen sort of a cultural shift of that 2 minutes video being way too long because people are now used to seeing way short form content. So that short form, which was 2 minutes before, is actually now about 15 seconds. And
The
it's
appetite changed.
Yeah, the appetite completely changed, and it was driven by millennials. So I think that's been a major component to how they've contributed to the space, in addition to the fact that these are going to be the heaviest users for the longest period of time as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how they sort of shape and continue to change and alter social media as a whole.
That's great. Well, Lance, thank you so much for your work,
Thank
for
you.
being a pioneer. Much continued success, and I look forward to seeing what you do over 2015 and beyond.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it.